Some considerations about morality and determinism. Um, I think so. One, it's not immediately obvious what the subject comprehends or encompasses. Um, we could take it, for instance, from a political perspective or from a pure metaphysical perspective. We could regard the question as a historical question. When did it first arise? Who were the first to bring it to prominence? Who were the considered to be the best explicators of its gravity and seriousness for discussion, etc., etc. Um, but let's look at it over. Let's just look at. So that was the overview, but let's just look at sort of hunt and peck and look at a few things. One thing that occurs to me is when Aristotle deals with this type of problem, which is, so for instance, if I have to ask what is determinism or what is morality, um, he usually has leeway in the following sense. Like, so for instance, when he asks the question, how do we know when we're dealing with a happy life in the Nicomachean Ethics? And he brings up the Priam example. He says, like, we have to look not just at, and I think the reason he does that is because right after Priam dies, then maybe there's some uncertainty about whether his children are going to die too. It's something along those lines anyway. But the point is, Aristotle says, well, there could be big major things that happen right after somebody dies that change our determination about whether they lived a happy life or not. And that somehow suggests how we're to understand the term happiness and from what angle, sort of. But it's extremely subtle. So likely was when we try to say what determinism is, we have different accounts of what it means to be determined. Say somebody acts as though they were determined when they're pessimistic sometimes, when they're not using the full force of positive thinking, so-called. I think the problem when it's taken up in strictly physics terms, it depends on whether we look at what experiment showed, like the Libet experiment, or et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's a very primitive experiment. There's way more interesting ones on that kind of subject today. It's kind of a Zizek area, but he doesn't really research into it very much, I don't think. I mean, the Libet experiment was more than 40 years ago, I think. But whenever we look at it that way, we get disconnected immediately if we try to bring it into direct political experience. So I think let's first look at how this looks from the politics currently existing on the earth. So because you see in the Scandinavian countries where it's more, people are more what they call rationalistic. Scandinavia even more pronounced than Germany, but Germany already somewhat rationalistic. Then you see, like in the Anders Breivik case, for instance, that here's this guy that commits this mass murder, but he goes to a very nice prison, very cushy. No one attempts to make him feel bad. And it's almost like he's being given gifts rather than being punished. And the reason is because they figured on something like a nature-nurture account, it was determined that there's no real avoiding this outcome, and therefore why take why take a punishment attitude like we do. And I think there was just a education that's in the not Groundhog Day, but the Bill Murray was in it, the some comedy where the judge sentenced the kid to death for his own good, for his education. So it's as though, there's just an execution that was done carried out in a very cruel way, I think, in the South somewhere. And this shows a totally different attitude. This shows the attitude basically, but in a way, excuse me, what argues for that is basically the attitude, no, these people are not excused by their circumstances, by their nature and nurture, even by their genetics, even by their environment, extreme environment. No, they're either bad or they're good. And this is, so that's I think that's the reason for the extreme cruelty of some of what we see in the South, because they hold on to this older attitude. But you see, the attitude that's more prevalent, Southern California, which is the most progressive state, I think, in the country, it's still nothing like Scandinavia, and it's not a rational thing. It's more a cultural thing. Whether rational and cultural are ultimately interchange. I mean, just two states along a continuum. I think probably they are in a way. It's just that's what we call rational. They call themselves rational. They're living that way. I guess it's that specific take of saying, yeah, we're determined in this sense. But again, their sense of saying what determined is different from the physics accounts, and it's different from what the philosophers say, who take it up in different Gedanken experience, a different sort of mathematical, strict, but nonetheless totally abstract forms of their own